1 Kings chapter 15, 16 is where we are, and kind of bouncing between that and 2 Chronicles. We were talking Wednesday night about Asa. He was one of the kings in Judah that would come away with a good report. God would call him a good king because, as 2 Chronicles 14 says, he did all that was right in the eyes of the Lord. And with that, Judah enjoyed peace for a number of years because Asa went in and he destroyed all the foreign altars and the high places and their gods. And he commanded Judah to seek God. So there was good things that came through his reign. And Asa had a large army, but when problems came, it really was not the strength of the army that gave them the advantage. The advantage was God recognized Judah. And that had so much to do with the leadership of Asa in that period of time. So the Cushites came and caused some problems, and they had to battle and fight against them. But Asa and Judah routed them out, and Judah plundered the wealth of the Cushites. And we remember that it was just a few years prior that Egypt had come to Jerusalem and had taken so much of the riches, the gold, took things out of the temple. So Judah does not have the wealth that it had in the days of Solomon. And then, Asa came to a point where he kind of renewed his covenant with God. The Spirit of God came on Azariah the prophet and reminded him, if you seek him first, if you seek God first. That's kind of where we ended some things out on Wednesday night. It's such a powerful reminder, and we were able to make some good applications with that, not just with Asa, but with us, in our time, in our lives, that we have to seek God even as he was commanded to do such a long time ago. As we get into our study now, we're looking at 2 Chronicles chapter 16. We're bouncing over to that side. And Asa's war with Baasha. So you have Judah and Israel going to battle now. We have a lot of stuff to cover through the lesson today that I'm just going to say I think is not as exciting. We have had 2 or 3 class periods where we have spent a lot of time being able to talk about application. What does this mean to you and me? We've had 2 or 3 class periods as we've gone through this Bible story that has just been filled with application about look at God's mercy, look at God's grace, look at the faith of those who are following him. And we are able to make good application, good discussion on that. I find that a little harder today, just in the material that we're covering. It's a period of time that we need to kind of study our way through, and there's some points that we need to make along the way. But I want you to be helping me look for some points of application for us. And I think it's a little bit harder in the storyline that we're following today. But let's see what we can find and what we pull out of that today. So here we are, Judah and Israel lining up for war. This is the 36th year of Asa's reign is where we are. And let me get caught up here. Here we go. This should be where we are. It's not quite. I think I went too far. Well, actually, I really don't know where we are. That's the one. That's the one. The 36th year of Asa's reign. His reign is going to come to an end before so long. And there's some problem on the northern front. I think this is an important story for us to look at. So we have this reputation, or I should say, Asa has this reputation that we know about. That he has been faithful to God, that he has served God, and he's helped to draw Judah to be keen on that point and that idea. And what maybe has changed with him now, I don't know, has he become a little bit rattled? Because there's some things happening on the border between Judah and Israel. If we look at the map right there, we see Ramah around the middle. It's right on the border line. And Israel, the king of Israel, Baasha, has come there and fortified the city of Ramah. And what he's trying to do, he's trying to prevent his subjects from going from Israel to Judah. See, that's still going on. We saw that earlier on, that there were those in Israel that said, no, we've had enough of this. All of these golden calves and Baal worship and such. And there was those who fled to Judah. And I guess that's still happening, even here these 40 years or so later. And so, the king in the north thought, well, I'm going to fortify the city of Ramah. People come right through here, and I'm going to stop them so they can't come through. 2 Chronicles chapter 16 is where we're reading about this and where this event is taking place. And around verse 2, it says, 2 Chronicles 16, verse 2, Asa then took the silver and gold out of the treasures of the Lord's temple and of his own palace and sent it to Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, who was ruling Damascus. So this is one of the kings to the north. Asa's making some provisions here. He's going to go to this king in the north and say, hey, I need your help on something. Let there be a treaty between me and you, he said, as there was between my father and your father. See, I'm sending you silver and gold. Now break your treaty with Baasha, the king of Israel, so he will withdraw from me. Now look, on one hand, you have to think, well, that's pretty shrewd. I mean, that's some backwards diplomacy there. He's going to take care of his problem by going to the king up the north of Israel and say, hey, cause some problems up here, to kind of divert Baasha from what he's doing down here in the south, and he'll get him out of my hair. This is what I need. And after all, your daddy and my daddy, they were friends, remember? They had a treaty. And so when we first read this, there's this part of me that thinks, well, he's a pretty smart king. Is he? What's the issue? Yeah, you're right. Those riches, he's going to buy some help with these riches. Go with that a little bit more. What's wrong with this?
He's putting the trust in the riches and not in God.
Trust in the riches and not in God?
Well, he'd already seen the pattern of God helping him previously, and so he seems to have drifted from that.
Yeah, it's like what's up with this? There's already been these experiences where he has seen the strength and the power of God, and he has relied on God. What happened here? I mean, where's this petition to God? There's a problem. I need help. What should I do? Send a prophet. Help me to know what to do. We don't see that. And so if we read a little farther here, it says, verse 4, Ben-Hadad agreed with King Asa and sent the commanders of his forces against the towns of Israel. And they conquered some of those towns up there on the north. And Baasha is going to go like, forget Ramah. We have to go to the north here, and we have to protect our northern boundary. So that's what's happening. This is where a story just really goes bad. And so, while we have said on one hand, it kind of looks like, Asa had a good plan. It's not a good plan. God sees that it's not a good plan. Verse 7. At the time of Hanani, the seer, came to King Asa, king of Judah, and said to him, because you relied on the king of Aram, and not on the Lord your God, the army of the king of Aram has escaped your hands. Were not the Cushites and the Libyans a mighty army with great numbers of chariots and horsemen? Yet when you relied on the Lord, he delivered them in your hand. For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. You have done a foolish thing, and from now on you will be at war. Okay, give me some commentary and tell me, what do we need to walk away with here? What do we see?
We can trust in God and that he protects those who follow him.
God reminds Asa, you've already seen how I've helped you in the past. How when great armies came against you that were mighty and strong, how I was with you and you were victorious. And it's a little bit like God is saying to Asa, what are you thinking? And that's kind of what I want to say to him too. But I'll make that real. I mean, the applications that we have to make Do we ever do the same thing? In times when we're facing challenges in life that come, and we forget to go to God first, and we're seeking for His help, His guidance, His direction, because He'll be there for us. That's what God is saying to Asa, and all these centuries later is saying it to us too. Other thoughts, comments?
I think that's the exact point for young teens, especially and teenagers, is to get in the habit of going to God first.
To rely on God. And I don't know why this is so hard for us.
And it is a habit you have to.
It is a habit. It's just like prayer, going to God in prayer when we face issues in life. To have that habit to go. We said this a while back. We say the phrase that we've all said it. Well, nothing to do now but to pray. Like really, we've done everything else. It's like, well, I guess we'll try to pray now. I mean, I know we don't necessarily mean it when we say it that way, okay? But it's kind of what it infers when we say that.
It's human nature.
It is. And boy, somehow we've got to turn that around just so much, where petitioning God when we have issues is the first thing we do. And if we could just do that. Melanie.
If he knew who this was, the seer, he should know the advice is good.
Yeah.
At least give heed to what's being said before you go ahead with your own.
That's right. That's right. And God has sent to Asa before the seer or the prophets that have come to deliver to him God's word. And so my impression is that should he seek God's counsel, it'll be sent to him. Well, in fact, we just talked about that, about the message to Asa, seek first God. And here he's not done that. I just want that to marinate for a moment, because I think that's important to us. And for those teaching the youth classes next quarter, I think that's one of the main points here from this lesson that we need to get to our children. Those are the applications, that we can make. If we think back a little bit to King David, and when he was at that point of transitioning things to Solomon, and we spent some time on this just a little while back. Remember David's concern and David's prayer for Solomon included such things as he prayed for Solomon to serve God wholeheartedly. And I kind of think this is the same point or same subject here, that our service and our faithfulness to God has to be 100%. And with Asa, now here's another point. Asa has a long history of doing that. What happened? Why did that change? And so for any time that we kind of think, well, that would never happen to me, I wouldn't do that, I'm going to serve God faithfully all the way out, let's be careful. Let's quit being so cocky. Because we can all lose our focus. And let's not do that. Okay? Jimmy.
I'm just sitting here thinking, I don't think that way. Like, I'm going to get it right. Like, I know, and, it's hard sometimes to go, wow, here's some crazy things that are going wrong. And I think about it to myself.
Mm-hmm.
How can I pray about it?
Right.
I identify more with the children of Israel, of that cycle of you go back to God, you start living your life well, you start, you are more mindful of prayer, and then life gets in the way, and then the next thing you know, some things come up or whatever, and you go, man, I need to, but I also, think about that time, I think about, it's a crazy song, but I only go to God when I need a favor, right, and is that the way He sees me?
Right. Right.
And I hope not.
But if that can happen to Asa, we've seen others that have responded the same way. Why would we think that it couldn't happen to us? And that's maybe the message that comes out for us to think about. Jake?
Yeah, I guess to develop that a little bit further, as you said, why is it so hard? I think about this a lot. We are in this world. This world is in our face. We are a part of this world. God made this world and put us in it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's in our face. And when we read a story like this, again, He's in the world. He's utilizing His resources, the things that are there constantly in front of Him. But to develop that further, what God wants us to do is to look past everything that's in front of our face. Our faith should be strong enough to
and to have our heart so set on him that we can see that difference. And back to David's prayer for Solomon was just for that. That his heart would be so set on God that he would serve him absolutely and all the time. So, sort of the continuing story on this, because we're getting toward the end of Asa's life. Here in chapter 16 still of 2 Chronicles. Let's see here. Let's go to verse 10. Asa was angry with the seer because of this. He was so enraged that he put him in prison. At the same time, Asa brutally oppressed some of the people. There's this part of me that's going like, where did this come from? Because this is not the Asa that we've seen for the previous 36 years. Okay, something has happened. He's totally lost focus. It's the old saying, don't shoot the messenger kind of a thing. He's mad at the messenger. The messenger was just providing what God said. Don't shoot the messenger. Susan?
I was thinking when I was reading this yesterday that his health was not good at all. And I just wondered if that could have had some.
I've wondered that, because now we're getting at that point now where it becomes evident he's not well. That he's not well. It's good. The next verse, in fact, verse 17 goes on to say, verse 11, the events of Asa's reign from the beginning to the end are written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. In the 39th year of his reign, Asa was afflicted with a disease in his feet. Though his disease was severe, even in his illness, he did not seek help from the Lord, but only from the physicians. Isn't that disappointing? I mean, we kind of had our expectations set up pretty high with Asa. Because here finally there's a king that's come along that has done so many good things and has helped Judah so much to move in the direction of serving God. And, as we get older, some of us, that's very real today. As we get older, you ever get a little bit concerned that, like, well, I don't want to mess this up on the way out? I mean, I've known some preachers that have messed up on the way out. And it's like, why does that happen? And how does that happen? And it's just, and Asa, it's like, isn't this disappointing? It just troubles me. It's like, wow, missing up here at the end, Cal.
I think there's a really good practical application here for us. Asa's reaction when the seer comes, he gets angry. When we think about our relationship with each other, what is one of our responsibilities? If we see a brother who is struggling or is in sin, we're supposed to go to him, right? We're supposed to say, hey, what's going on? I see what's going on here. Let me help you. And if someone comes to us in that way, like this seer came to Asa, and we react with anger because we have pride and we think, I can do this, I'm doing whatever, I'm fine. And then this goes on, he gets sick, and he still refuses to do the right thing and act the right way. And he, that's something that can be very difficult even for us, right? Like, it's a pride thing. And whether or not we want to admit our faults and we want to recognize what that brother is doing and coming to us and trying to help us, how are we going to react? Are we going to react like Asa? Are we going to react and acknowledge the love that that person had in coming to us?
And why it's worthwhile to be doing this type of study and to see some of these issues that come up. Because if someone were to say along the way, well, listen, now don't act like Asa, many would go, who? What did Asa do? Or who is Asa? Oh, now we know. We see what the value of the stories that are sometimes kind of hidden that we don't usually turn to. But here we are spending a lot of time talking about Asa because there's lessons to be learned from that. All right, good thoughts, good points on that for sure. All right, so Asa's life is kind of coming to an end. Back to our little chart that you can't read. You know, on the Judah side on the left, Asa served 41 years. God still called him a good king. Still deemed that he was a good king. And his son, Jehoshaphat, is going to succeed him. But first, we are now kind of going back over to the side of Israel to talk about Nadab a little bit. So we are going to 1 Kings now as we bounce back and forth between Chronicles and Kings. 1 Kings chapter 15. So Jeroboam ruled for 22 years. He was an evil king. And as we've said, every king that comes along on that side of Israel is going to be determined by God to be an evil king. Jeroboam's son Nadab becomes the king of Israel. God no longer plans to establish Jeroboam's dynasty. You remember, think back when the prophet came to Jeroboam saying, God is saying to him, I'm going to give the kingdom, half the kingdom to you. In fact, 10 tribes are going to you, and I'm going to establish through you. Remember? Well, God now is saying, nope, that's not going to happen. You didn't do the things that I told you to do and wanted you to do. So that dynasty of Jeroboam having, a lineage of sons and grandsons serving on the throne, it's not going to happen that way. Nadab was a very wicked king. He walked in the ways of his father. 1 Kings chapter 15, and at verse 25 we take up. Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, became king of Israel in the second year of King Asa of Judah and reigned over Israel for 2 years. Okay, so this is what's confusing. We've talked about this some before as we bounce back and forth. Okay, we just kind of came to the end of Asa's life. But now, chronologically, in Asa's life, where are we at? At the beginning, okay? As we come back to this account. In verse 26, Nadab did evil in the eyes of the Lord, walking the ways of his father, in his sin, which he had caused Israel to commit. So blame in the direction that Israel's going has a whole lot to do with the king. That's the way God looks at this, and the evil leadership that they had there. Verse 27. Baasha, son of Ahijah, of the house of Issachar, plotted against him, that is, against Nadab. And he struck him down at Gibbethon, a Philistine town, while Nadab and all of Israel were besieging it. Baasha killed Nadab in the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, and succeeded him as king. Well, that didn't last long. So Nadab was a king of short duration, and Baasha succeeds him. But then it goes on in verse 29, and as soon as he began to reign, he killed Jeroboam's whole family. He did not leave Jeroboam anyone that breathed, but destroyed them all, according to the word of the Lord, giving through his servant Ahijah. Because of the sins Jeroboam had committed and had caused Israel to commit, and because he provoked the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger. And so here's what Baasha did. He kills all the family of Jeroboam. And what we also know that this is what God wanted to happen. This was part of God's plan right there, because he was very angry with Nadab. And so, boy, now this little chart, we start moving along. We had Jeroboam, then Nadab. Nadab was only for 2 years. Baasha succeeds him. Over on the Judah side, Asa for 41 years. Jehoshaphat succeeds him. Where does our story go now? And so we're not even going to do this review from Jeroboam to Nadab to Baasha. We just did that. But now there's a war again between Asa and Baasha. And really there were skirmishes throughout their reigns. Verse 32 gives a little insight on that. In the 36th year of the reign of Asa, Baasha went up against Judah. Baasha is trying to prevent anyone from leaving, the territory going down to Asa. We talked about that a little bit before, but now we're kind of getting the other side of the story here, looking at it from Israel's standpoint. The population was growing in Judah, and really the spirituality of Judah seems to be increasing, because those who are leaving Israel are leaving the north because of the wickedness. the idols, the golden calves. Remember how we talked the other night, how many of the priests in the north have come down to Judah because they were not serving God. Oh, they were priests. Remember, Jeroboam had set priests in Israel, but not of the Levitical tribe, just anyone he was putting in. So Judah is growing. And so if you're a king in Israel, you would be thinking, well, this is not good. Just from a strategic point, the king would be thinking that this is not a good thing. But what was bringing that on was the lack of spirituality in Israel and that of the king. So let's talk about Baasha here for a moment. He reigned for 24 years. And he walked in the ways of Jeroboam. So there's nothing that good comes out to make us say, oh boy, Israel has some good leadership now. God would say, no, that's not the case. Chapter 16, verse 2. Verse 1. Then the word of the Lord came to Jehu, son of Hanani, against Baasha. I lifted you up from the dust and made you leader of my people Israel. But you walked in the ways of Jeroboam and caused my people to sin and to provoke me to anger by their sins. This is God's view. This is how God views Baasha. And so the prophet, rebukes and reproves Baasha. And it becomes so evident how God is displeased, with this and what is going on. Let's see, verse 7. Moreover, the word of the Lord came through the prophet Jehu, the son of Hanani, to Baasha, to his house, because of all the evil he had done in the eyes of the Lord, provoking him to anger by the things he did, and becoming like the house of Jeroboam, and also because he destroyed it. The prophecy concerning his house, God is not pleased with Baasha. And he's saying, things are not going to be well with you, because you are not walking in my ways. He served for 24 years, but verse 6 would say that Baasha's reign came to an end, and his son Elah succeeded him as king. So, now we're adding to our chart the kings of Israel. But oh boy, there's some kings that they're not going to make it very long. Okay? Boy, there's just some things underfoot. Elah, king of Israel. Chapter 16, just to get our context, which for Elah, there's not a lot. In the 26th year of Asa, king of Judah, Elah, the son of Baasha, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Tisra for 2 years. Zimri, one of his officials who had commanded half of his chariots, plotted against him. Elah was in Tisra at the time, getting drunk in the home of Arza, the man in charge of the palace in Tisra. Zimri came in, struck him down, and killed him in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, and he succeeded him as king. So Zimri comes in. Zimri was one of the commanders of Elah. Who can you trust these days, right? And as we will see with some of the kings, and some of those who are closest to them are the ones who plot against them. Zimri immediately went about killing all of the men of Baasha's family. Verse 11. Did we read that yet? No. As soon as he began to reign, he was seated on the throne. He killed off Baasha's whole family. He did not spare a single male, whether relative or friend. So Zimri destroyed the whole family of Baasha in accordance with the word of the Lord spoken against Baasha through the prophet Jehu, because of all the sins that Baasha and his son had committed and caused Israel to commit and provoked the Lord. It's interesting that with so many of these kings, we also get that little commentary of how they stood before the Lord. We get the Lord's view, not just of their kingship, but really it's a view of how God sees them. And so on our king chart, we move again. Elah is no more. He was only for 2 years. Zimri succeeded him. And so Zimri as well has just a short reign. Verse 16, 15. In the 27th year of King Asa, king of Judah, Zimri reigned in Tisra 7 days. 7 days. The army was encamped near Gibbethon, a Philistine town. When the Israelites in the camp heard that Zimri had plotted against the king and murdered him, they proclaimed Omri, the commander of the army, king over Israel, that very day there in their camp. So now we see there's a battle within Israel. Who's the leader and who's the king? Zimri and his soldiers totally rejected the idea of who was going to be king. They appointed the commander, Omri, to be king over Israel. So here's what was happening. The soldiers, Omri and soldiers, withdrew to Gibbethon. And so just to get our map back in our mind a little bit, they were in Gibbethon. When they hear what's going on up here in the north, well, they travel quickly there. Zimri was in Tisra up here. And when he saw that the city was being overtaken by Omri, he committed suicide in the royal palace. He set it on fire. He was in the middle of that. He burned himself in this, killed himself that way. And that's how his brief reign came to an end. And so, well, let's see. Okay, I think that kind of hits those points. Let's stop for a minute and take a breath. As we said, we're traveling now, traveling through some time very quickly. And some kings that are just kind of dropping off here to the left and right. Any thoughts that you have? Comments you want to add? What are you thinking? Joe?
See some wicked kings last a long time or some short period. It just makes me think that the judgment of God is, the time isn't always working the way that we think it would. So some of these guys last a really long time, even though they're evil. In some short period of time, it's not this where we would expect it to be quick regardless, but God doesn't operate the same way we do as far as his judgment.
And you're right. And sometimes why an evil king, when we see an evil king who reigns only a short time and he's taking out of the picture, we kind of go like, well, I get that. He was a bad guy. But then there's another evil king that comes along and reigns a long time. And you wonder, why is that? But God's point and purpose on some things we don't always know and don't always understand. Sometimes we see an evil king that's reigning in Israel and challenges Judah a lot. And we think like, well, why doesn't God take that out? But sometimes that's a period of time when Judah is the strongest. And maybe we'll see that as we go along. We don't always understand or see God's place or purpose in some of these things. But I think often there is just that. Let's finish up a couple points here and our time will be gone. Elah, 2 years. Zimri, 1 week. Omri succeeds him. And he's going to reign several years. But the first part of his reign is questionable because it's like a time of discontent and civil war going on within Israel during that time. There were some who wanted Tibni to be king. And so there were some who were following him. There were some who were following Omri. And it took about a 4-year period of time for them to sort that out. And going back to one of the other accounts, you work out, well, how do you know that was 4 years? Well, it's from the 27th year of King Asa until the 31st year of King Asa that this discontent was going on. But Omri's supporters are the ones who would prevail, and they were stronger. He overcame. He became the king and reigned a total of time of 12 years. And again, he had control of the kingdom. He was a very strong and powerful king, and yet he was a very wicked king, one who provoked God anger because of his service to idols and all. And yet Omri must have been a very strong king politically, because secular history even talks about the house of Omri. I always find that interesting when there is secular history that speaks about Bible characters, which happens somewhat frequently, actually. But for this king of just 12 years to be mentioned in secular history says something about his place and position in world powers, that he was known and recognized that way. He must have been pretty strong politically, in that he had a lot of alliances with other kings in the area and around him. He lived in Tisra for 6 years, but he bought a hill in Samaria and called it and he called it Samaria. That point doesn't make sense, but he called it Samaria, is what he did. And that's going to become now the capital of Israel through the rest of our story of seeing the kingdom of Israel. All right, that's where we're going to quit right there. The bell's going to ring here in a second. So, God willing, on Wednesday night, we're going to continue the story of some of these kings. And maybe we'll get back to some stories, too, where we find those points of applications that we can make. But we had to get through some of these kings today just to follow our chronology. All right, very, very glad that you were here this morning. I appreciate so much your comments.